Welcome. It is Dr. Jen with Aging Advantage. Today we're going to be continuing talking about food. We all love food. It's amazing, right? But one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is really like arriving at the heart of kind of like this whole food topic, and that we talked about a little bit last time too, in regards to, like a lot of times, we just look at food, if you will, as like nutrients for our body. But really, like overall, it is, yes, and it's fuel, yes. But the other thing, again, that food really can be as well is really, kind of like nutrients, if you will, like for our soul. Because again, there is so many cultural components and also like generational components, like we discussed last time as well, that that food serves. Not just, we need to get the vitamins and the protein and the, sugars and the carbs and all the things like from the food. But, we also have to get that whole, like I was talking about last time, that whole food being prepared with love and, in the nurture and the care, and really also looking at like that gift that food also brings into our life. And so, I think for a lot of people, especially nowadays, again, as we get like busier and busier in our lives, it's hard sometimes to like stop and slow down, and realize like, okay, there are good moments, to being in the kitchen. There are incredible moments to be able to have, like someone else in the kitchen with you, or, like again, like a multi-generational situation. There's so many opportunities to connect, I think, and to make memories that people, again, can cherish now and also long term, that I think is just so fun. And whether that is, maybe like what would be a holiday tradition, like normally, for example, like, like maybe like at Christmas, for example, we might think, okay, we make like the turkey. Well, like at Thanksgiving, we'll call it Thanksgiving. Okay. Like we'll make like the turkey and the sweet potatoes and the green beans and the pumpkin pie and the cranberry sauce, like traditional, et cetera, et cetera. But like traditional kind of Thanksgiving food, right? Hear me out. What if, as a memory, though, like you all just eat fried chicken and mashed potatoes and gravy and biscuits and, whatever. Or you do like, like make like taco burrito bar or something. You do like Mexican food or, at Christmas, I know one of my extended family, we literally just always did, and this was so fun. We literally always did like a seafood Christmas. Yes. So we would make like crab legs, and we'd make like tuna steaks, and we'd even sometimes like have shark and just, scallops and shrimp, just all this different kind of seafood. Sometimes we'd even do like a crawfish broil for something, that maybe like Easter or just some other kind of like different, different like time frame, right? And so think about that too. Like as we're going through some of this stuff today too, think about ways that you can kind of like take, kind of what like the traditional lane would be, but look at ways that you could maybe do it a little bit different. Now, particular cultures, I get it. And, particular holidays, like for example, like the Seder plate, and things like that. Like there are certain things that traditionally that like need to be on that plate for that type of holiday, and that type of like tradition, overall. And so like, yeah, keep that stuff the same. That's fine. But the expanded palette, around that, look at ways that, maybe you could do it different, potentially than you've always done it before. And I think, something too that is really kind of cool is also, as we're going through this topic today as well, just really looking at how do we maybe incorporate different kinds of cultures or different types of traditions into kind of what we're doing. So I just want to kind of start with that before we even begin today, just to kind of get your brain thinking, and thinking a little bit different, different ways that you could maybe implement some different kinds of things that you guys haven't been before into like creating some of these different kinds of memories, purposeful and meaningful kind of memories, moving forward, not just the let's get in the kitchen, hurry up, get this food cooked, get it out, let's clean up and everybody out, done. How do we kind of create different kinds of memories and traditions and things like that? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And again, Jen with Aging Advantage. So, Aging Advantage, we are a nonprofit here in the St. Louis area. We serve St. Louis and surrounding areas. And we do that through grants and donations, as well as incredible partnerships that we have with so many different organizations around our area. And also, some even also nationwide. And it's just absolutely beautiful. So, because of that, we're able to learn about all kinds of different types of information and content and, partner with those people and share all this incredible knowledge and wisdom with all of you. So, like I said, today we're talking about cooking. So sit back, relax, maybe grab a snack actually today with your drink, but grab what you're drinking and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start, like I said, kind of with this whole like cherishing the memories. And again, there's so many different ways really to look at food. Again, we have to look at it as being nourishment, like I said, for our body, because, let's face it, we have to eat a variety of different types of foods and fruits and vegetables to be able to get, again, like the different vitamins and nutrients and things that are in different things, like example. Um, and I think I talked about this in a different one a long time ago, but like example, fun fact, like actually like red peppers um, actually have a lot of vitamin C, just like almost how strawberries would. We typically would think of strawberries like that, but not necessarily as peppers. So I'm just throwing that out there also because the cool thing, guys, is when you really dig into some of these different cultures and some of these different recipes and again, some of the different ways that some of these things are cooked or prepared. You look at just the different styles of cooking things, right? You can like steam things, you can, broil things, you can bake them, obviously, you can whip them, you can chop them, you can, like there's just you boil them in water, there's a lot of different things. Some people will grill things, etc. Some people will smoke things. And it's kind of interesting. And it's also kind of interesting too, because as well, in some cultures, like they won't prepare food a certain way, especially for certain types of food. Like they won't, allow certain types of food to actually be prepared over like an open flame. It has to be, prepared like in a different kind of way. For example, or another thing might be, some cultures, and again, just some of it, is religious kind of preferences for some of the cultures, but it's just like embedded into the culture and also like into their food and into their recipes. Like, for example, like some like they will not eat pork like at all, like zero. Um, or again, like if you have somebody as well, maybe that would be like another example, this kind of a more kind of like mainstream for some people, that they would think about this would be also like people that are like vegan, people that are vegetarian. As well, nowadays we have in the food department, we have so much more awareness as well around like food allergies and food sensitivities, etc. So there's a lot more people that have like gluten intolerance is like a huge one. Dairy is going to be, maybe another one. Some people have issues, with like soy or also, like just with like tree nuts, peanut allergies, etc. And literally the list, as you all are aware, I'm sure it goes like on and on and on and on and on. But the main point here is that like, sometimes also it's fascinating because when you go back and you look at sometimes again like a particular culture and particular types of food that kind of culture traditionally will fix, the recipes and the ingredients in them, etc. Some cultures and and kind of like parts of the world, etc., whatever, um are just their like genetic, line, if you will, are sometimes like just more prone to having different kind of sensitivities. So, well, like I was talking about seafood stuff earlier, seafood's a huge one. I mean, shellfish allergies, and things like that. Same thing like peanuts and different things, even like gluten for some people. I mean, it can literally put people in like anaphylactic like shock. Um, and it can literally be life threatening for some of these people. And so when you look at some of these different cultures, especially some of the cultures that are like very isolated in different parts of the world, and not, in like big cities where they don't necessarily always have like access to, again, like immediate, emergency medical care, et cetera, whatever, you'll find sometimes like when you actually sit down and like dissect what's in some of these recipes, it's fascinating because again, a lot of people don't really have the logical and kind of mental awareness or emotional awareness, even for that matter, that some of the choices and some of the decisions for what is put into the recipes, even like spices and herbs and just different things like that too, are put in there to actually help mitigate or avoid, if you will, like certain kinds of sensitivities like that people might have, or also might help to do different things like for example in like Indian culture sometimes it is like common practice that sometimes they'll people will eat like fennel, like chew on fennel seeds when they're done eating food, or fennel, you'll see fennel, the fennel again like spice whatever, or like put into some of their food, right? And they do that because they feel like, it kind of like helps like stimulate, all the digestion things and kind of helps get everything moving and calm down and all of that process, right? And and it's just interesting. So like also some cultures too like have things that are like really freaking spicy, you know they put a lot of heat and a lot of kick and a lot of spice into their food. But when you think about it, like, why do they do that? Same thing. They feel like, it helps to like really, sometimes like they'll say, I guess like, Eastern, Western medicine kind of back and forth, but, that it will kind of like help boost, someone's kind of like quote unquote internal fire, right? Kind of like bring, like rise up, like someone's energy, kind of like internally, right? To kind of support external. And so it's interesting because there's again, like it's fascinating. But that's why, and I'm just starting with that, just throwing that out there again, because as we're going to kind of talk through some of these points a little more specifically, think about those kind of things, guys, too. Think about, a lot of times, again, people just look at the recipe and, they're just putting in herbs and putting in spices and, adding ingredients and whatever they do. But like, again, like sometimes like just stop for a second and think about, okay, well, like, why is goat's milk in this? Why is there not like cow's milk? Or why is like, sheep milk in here or something, or something totally different. Like why is it like this, or why do they use like duck eggs in this instead of chicken eggs, something even like that kind of swap out, right? And it's fascinating because that's where cooking, like in this whole kitchen experience and sharing memories and all this, like, gets really cool because a lot of things that we just take for face value and we just kind of take for granted, what's in this dish, if you will, that you're making. A lot of times when you like pause and you stop and you ask, I always tell you guys this, like, most important three-letter word after God, or whatever you call it, universe, creator, whatever, all the things, whatever you're going to call it. But is ask. Ask. You gotta ask. So, same thing with like these recipes, right, that are being handed down. Ask, like why was this put in here? Why was that not put in here? And it's fascinating too because, again, depending on the culture and where that recipe, when you go back however many generations, like where it started and where it derived also too, sometimes like those ingredients, and whether it's again, like vegetables, proteins, whatever it's going to be, right? But like even spices, herbs, or those ingredients were put in there because in the area that your family lived a couple generations ago, that was literally like the only kind of food potentially that grew well, or spices or herbs or whatever. That's the only thing that they had access to in that area. Maybe your family comes from an area that is originally, like way back, that it originally is very like a coastal. So in some of your dishes, like you might have a more heavier type of, seafood presence, and fish kind of presence in some of your food. Whereas, somebody else, they may have a lot more, just different kinds of protein or different kinds of meats. Or again, maybe they just didn't have access to a lot of meat at all because, the animals couldn't thrive well in their environment, but they could just grow the heck out of like, vegetables and fruits and all kinds of herbs and spices, that they could make and stuff like that. And so you may find then that your lineage sometimes is very like plant-based. And so it's just like, it's fascinating when you go back and you really like look at like, okay, like how did we get here? you know and again, like there is definitely, I think, like a sacredness, if you will, in keeping the recipes like how they are and how they are the same. But also, like we talked about in the last episode as well, starting the cooking workshop off, is that also too, like, allow your space in the kitchen to be a creative kind of safe space, if you will. So also, like, get in there, with some of these recipes, again, that have been the same maybe for many generations, but because of these things, now that you're thinking about it, and start experimenting. Okay, great. Well, like, again, like this has always had this kind of milk in it, but like, I don't know, what if we put this kind of cream in instead? Or someone always used like coconut sugar, or something like that, or some other different kind of sugar. Like what if we put, or maybe they used maple syrup because like again, that's what they had available, or they maybe used coconut milk because that's what they had available. What if we use something different? And so you can kind of like, start to like experiment what changing some things out maybe, and you can create like your own new spin and twist on some of these recipes. And how cool would that be, to also then take that and hand that down, right? To future generations as well. And so, and I think like that, is again some of like the beautiful things too that you can, really like put your influence and kind of your vibe and your flavor profiles and stuff like that into some of these recipes also because, again, as just again, like as all of our different cultures mix and all of our different food styles kind of like all mixed together, and there are more like multicultural marriages and things like that and just friendships like I mean my goodness, like just think about all the different backgrounds that all your different friends have. um and I even think it would be cool and fun to even do like a how they do like progressive dinners, sometimes, but to do that sort of, but just kind of like instead have like maybe like 12 different cultures or however many different cultures. And like once a month, like one of the families like would host, everybody else, like, the other 11 families or, whatever the other 11 couples or whatever it would be. But like at their house and have like a gathering and they could cook like all their traditional recipes and food, like, but have all those people come over and be a part of cooking the food and prepping the food and doing the recipes and kind of see how they do it, right? And then every month you switch to like a different person's house. And you get to like experience a whole entire different culture and like how they do it, right? And like how cool and powerful and beautiful would that be? So I mean, same thing again, right? About like food, like making memories. Like what a gift to be able to share that. So, again, I know a lot of times people again think of food as very, like yes, we keep talking about the multi-generational thing, but I mean, think of it even in terms of like in your own neighborhood, even if you're gonna like grill or barbecue or whatever, someone fires up the grill, but like my goodness, you might have like five different again cultures represented in one neighborhood, and so everybody would kind of bring all the stuff that they would normally want grilled, and then you guys could kind of all see how that might go. And so, anyway, just, cool different options and ideas that, I want you guys to think of as we're kind of going through some of this. So, again, kind of like cherishing the memories part, we've really like arrived at kind of the heart of what I want you to leave you guys with today. And really, that's going to start with a phrase from the slide that I think is one of the most beautiful descriptions of food that, again, like I've ever heard. Food is memories made visible, which is kind of neat, right? So we're going to sit with that for a second. Again, food is memories made visible. So like every dish, like I said, you're making is a form of really like remembering and also connecting. Because every time you pull out again that recipe card or you follow a recipe maybe that you have memorized so thoroughly that it like lives in your brain, right? And then lives in your hands. You're making something invisible like visible. But you're also taking love and loss and belonging and that history, right? And your family's history and joy, etc., and bringing them into the present moment in a form that can be like tasted and smelled and touched and shared with other people, like as such a gift. And, the slides really like offer us invitation, right? We want to like try to savor the moment, right? Savor that process, savor the experience and the creative experience. We want to share the memories as well. And I want to say, something too about both of those things, because I think, they both deserve attention too. So again, in terms of savoring the process in our culture, so many times, and again, God love us all, but we have gotten again like just so busy and so goal orientated, etc. We're often so focused on outcomes and on getting the meal perfect and on the table and checking the box. Also, we're trying to be efficient. And especially, when we're meal prepping, if we are like a family that meal preps for the week, we're super all about just trying to be efficient, right? And that we rush through like the very moments that kind of matter most. But that process of cooking itself is where so much of this meaning lives. And again, like the rhythm of just like chopping the vegetables, like washing them and chopping them, and the smell of something beginning to like bloom in a hot pan, the feel of like bread dough like under your hands, while you're making it or you're getting the pasta ready, um, etc. So like that moment also too, which is kind of cool, like when that sauce finally comes together and like, okay, yep, got it right, like nailed it, great. That actually tastes good. We are there. We did it. So those moments are worth slowing down for. And, they're worthy of your full attention, and appreciation. And if you find yourself like rushing through cooking because it feels like a chore, which we have all been there at points in our life for sure, I want to genuinely invite you to try an experiment. So this is fun, right? So put on some music that you love and, pour yourself a cup of tea or a glass of something that you enjoy. And, give yourself more time. This is this is the next step. This would be step 3. Give yourself way more time than you think you're going to need. Because again, like cooking usually takes longer than we think it's going to. But just try to be present in the kitchen. Like, don't think about, what comes next. Don't worry about whether it's going to turn out right. Just simply like experience the act of like making something like with your hands, just like you would in arts and crafts class, or doing some other kind of hobby or painting or whatever. Same kind of thing. You're just kind of like, painting with food, if you will. And, see like what that actually like feels like. And share stories again. Like this is a piece that I feel like super cool and passionate about. So these recipes again in your life can share these stories. And the stories deserve to be told. And again, not just written down in a recipe box that's collecting dust and like stuffed underneath someone's cabinet somewhere, but actually like told the content, the people, like the occasions that these recipes were used for, what it actually like felt like to be in that kitchen. Like what were the sounds, what was happening, etc. Also like what it meant for those people to be in that space. And I want to encourage you to find opportunities like that, to share those stories with people in your life who will absolutely like treasure them. Because, there's so many like beautiful ways to do this. And again, some families create like recipe books and, not just the recipes themselves. I'm going to encourage you, like, yes, that's fine. So maybe some people like an idea might be like put the recipe on the front of the page, but then on the back of the whole entire page, really like again sit and like talk to everyone and figure out like what is the actual story behind this recipe and write that down on the back of the page so people have that too, so you can really have like a record of yourself telling the story of a recipe as you make it. Sometimes even again we have technology nowadays, everyone, so sometimes even you can do like now even like a simple video on your phone that can become like an irreplaceable like piece of history as well and for your family, and that can be super super cool to share as well. And you can even show how like great grandma needed the bread or something for, or needed the crust, or made the like the pie crust a certain way or whatever. And so that can be super cool because again we have that kind of technology now. Another another neat thing to do as well is you can write letters to grandchildren or great grandchildren that include not just the recipe, but again, everything that surrounds it. Who taught you, actually, like how old you were when you learned it and what it means to you. And these are gifts, like true gifts that are going to totally outlast you. And they're gifts that only you can pass down and only the answers to these things and that only you can actually give. So every meal you prepare, again, even just a simple weeknight dinner, even, then like something that you've done 100 times, it's really like a chance to stop again and kind of create those lasting memories and deeper bonds that really matter. So, don't underestimate too, like just the power of like it's an ordinary, Tuesday or something. The meals that people remember most aren't often always like the grand holiday feasts. They can be, but they're often, just like the breakfast after sleepovers that you had. Sometimes even like soups that someone made when someone was sick. That's a fascinating, really neat one too. Birthday cakes. What type of birthday cakes or desserts? With candles, slightly crooked, but like again, the ordinary repeated with love becomes an extraordinary act of, just act of sharing and, an extraordinary memory. So, and finally, again, I just really want you guys to embrace cooking really as a gift and really as, a gift to yourself and a gift to others that you love and, to yourself, because again, the cool thing about cooking actually again engages your mind because you have to think, you have to plan, you have to prep, you have to problem solve, and you also have to then again figure out how do you make this thing like look good and how do you make it taste good also. So you kind of use your creativity, your senses, and your connection also again to your own history and what's important to you. So research in healthy aging consistently shows that engaging in meaningful activities such as this, and especially bonus points like this, and why bonus points, that this is such a good activity, like things that use your hands. So we're checking that use your memory, checking that, your creativity, yes, and your relationships, also super yes for cooking, supports cognitive health and also your emotional well-being and just your overall quality of life. And again, cooking checks all of those boxes for you. So, and to those that you love, because the act of preparing food for another person also is one of the most like direct expressions of care that exists in human life. It says, like, I thought about you. I put time and effort into something for you, and you matter enough to me that I wanted to help, nourish you. And, that message, whether it's received across the table or dropped off, as food, as a little food gift to someone's front door, is one that, no words can like fully replace. And so, I think that is really what is just so cool again about food again, is you're like really giving yourself, and your talents as a gift to others in your life. And so don't, necessarily ever like underestimate that. And, like I said before, especially people like very occasionally you'll hear me talk about, all the different love languages, but especially for people that acts of service and also, gift giving, those people a lot of times are going to be your real good cooks when they give that way, because that's just, how they feel comfortable, showing up. So they may not, do some big, huge, elaborate, thing or whatever, but, them making you fresh sourdough bread is their way of saying, like, I love you, I care about you, I'm thinking about you, and you're important to me. They may not say those words, because, like words of affirmation might not be their thing, but they do it through food. And so, anyway, so, things to keep in mind. But anyway, yeah, again, it's a true gift to be able to share, again, the cultural experiences and just also, just those moments with one another. So my challenge for you is to, again, like look at what recipes does your family have? And again, how can you maybe put, again, some recipe books and photocopy some stuff and, give them out to everyone? But how can you maybe take some of those really important, like cherished, handed down recipes? And again, put the recipe on the front of the page. And then on the back side of that page, write down, maybe again, like how old you were, when you learned how to make it, who taught you, where you were, where you were like living, maybe again, like it was in a different country potentially, etc. But again, some of the different specifics, or and again in this too, sometimes even like economics, and again what you had available that you could actually access back then to put in the recipe as ingredients, but like put all those different things down. Like, how did it come to be the way that it is? And those, again, memories and moments are just invaluable. And there's such an incredible, like, deep connection that you'll be able to share, again, not with this generation, but, for generations to come, for your legacy, if you will. So, we got to keep the legacy going. And why not, pull it through to your legacy in the kitchen as well. So thank you all for joining me again. And as always, if you find this content helpful and entertaining and all the things, and you know someone that it would be helpful to share it with, please share. And also, like and follow our Facebook page, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss other important content like this in the future. And again, thank you for joining me and checking out this episode. And as always, take care of yourselves and also take care of each other. We will see you on the next one. Thanks.